Good afternoon. This lecture video talks about the self from various perspectives. Across disciplines, different thinkers approach understanding the self in many ways. Some focus in their inner awareness, others on how we are in roles, or how we relate to others, or what we believe in ourselves to be our core. The historical roots and thinkers in relation to the study of self or nature of self dates back to these personalities. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and St. Augustine explore how early thinkers considered the soul, identity, and consciousness. David Hume, on the other hand, emphasized the self as a bundle of perceptions, while Carl Rogers offered a psychological lens focusing on self concept, self esteem, and the drive to self actualization. Charles Horton Cooley introduced the looking glass self, how our self image is shaped by how we believe others perceive us, while George Herbert Mead considered the social origins of the mind and self as an actor, agent, and author, exploring the self as doer, decision maker, and storyteller. Each perspective gives us tools to explore identity, ego, being, soul, I, am, being, psyche, and events in our lives that shape who we are. Simply put, the different perspectives provide the means to explain the self and the qualities that define it. By different perspectives, it refers to philosophy, psychology, sociology, spirituality, etc. While providing the means it gives tools, ideas, models, and ways to think. By explaining the self, it gives us ways how we understand who we are, our identity, our experiences, and how we think of ourselves. While the words the qualities that define it refers to traits, roles, values, feelings, beliefs, and the features that make you as a person unique. Using different viewpoints from philosophy, psychology, society, among many others, it gives us tools to better understand who we are, the self, and to describe what makes us who we are, the qualities that define us. Have you ever asked yourself, who am I? What am I? Or noticed how sometimes you feel very different depending on where you are or who you're with? The idea of self is one of the oldest and deepest questions humans have been asking in philosophy, psychology, religion, and art. The image is a diagram that explains different perspectives on the concept of the self. At the center of the diagram is a red circle labeled self, with guiding questions: who am I and what am I? From this circle, five arrows point outward to boxes representing the different perspectives used to understand the self. Psychological perspective views the self in terms of thoughts, emotions, behavior, and mental processes, while the self as embedded in culture or anthropological emphasizes how culture, traditions, and social norms shape the self. The philosophical perspective. It explores the self through abstract reasoning, identity, existence, and meaning of life, while the self, as a product of society or sociological perspective, focuses on how social interaction, institutions, and roles influence the self. And lastly, the self in Western and Eastern thought. It compares different traditions and philosophies from Western individualistic and Eastern collectivistic viewpoints. The layout is visually simple, using red boxes and white text on a clean background, making it clear that the self can be understood through multiple lenses: psychology, anthropology, philosophy, sociology, and cultural traditions. The issues of self arise when there is conflict between how a person sees themselves and how they are shaped or judged by their society, culture, or personal experiences. One of the consistent issues on self is the nature versus nurture. This is where the genetics and heredity versus nurturing factors affect the self. It refers to the gene environment interaction. It is the complex interplay between the genetic predispositions and the environmental influences on behavior. Here, with regards to the nature versus nurture, the self is a product of both nature and nurture. Another issue is the identity versus the self. This is drawn from the psychology and social sciences. In essence, the self is the lived, reflective, subjective experience. It refers also to the I that thinks, feels, and knows itself, while the identity is the structured set of meanings, roles, and characteristics that define who I am in personal and social contexts. Primarily, the self is coming from the psychology, while the identity is coming from the social sciences. Another issue in the study of self is the dimensionalities of self. By dimensionalities of self, we generally mean that the self is not just one single and differentiated thing. Rather, it has many facets or dimensions, levels, kinds, and perspectives, such as explicit versus implicit self, which refers to the conscious versus unconscious self representations, personal dimensions, which refers to the traits, emotions, beliefs, values, versus the social dimensions, which refers to the roles, relationship, and group membership. Another is the cognitive dimension, emotional dimension, physical or bodily dimension, and as well as spiritual dimension. Another dimension also is the self-concept clarity, self-esteem, self-identity, and self-comparison.